Hi, it's May 29th, 2012. I'm here in Stony Creek, Ontario. My name is Reginald Angus Argue. I'm about to talk to the soon-to-be former Miss America, Teresa Scown. Teresa, the first question I have to ask you, right before we were talking, you talked about your heritage from your mother's standpoint,
Right.
coming from Croatia. What do you feel, how much do you feel that that's inspired other, girls that are now growing up in Croatia? With what you've been able to accomplish in regards to Miss America?
Oh, I certainly hope that it's maybe inspired them a small bit. I know that growing up, I didn't ever think that Miss America was something that I could accomplish. Being from where I was from and from my family, I grew up in western Nebraska. My mom was first generation American, and my parents ended up moving to Nebraska in a little town of 8,000 people. So being from a small area and from Nebraska, I really had kind of set my goals somewhat low because of that, because oftentimes we do just automatically think that because of where we come from that we can't accomplish certain things. So when I competed for Miss America, I was actually 17 years old at the time, and Miss Nebraska had never ever won Miss America in 90 years. So I never thought it was possible, for sure, and I ended up being the youngest in over 70 years to win the title of Miss America, and the first from Nebraska. And so that showed me definitely what is possible and what you're able to accomplish no matter where you come from or who your family is. And so I certainly hope that that really teaches people from all over the country the same thing, and all over the world, those who have grown up in other countries and aren't native to America. But I know that I learned so much from my grandparents and my parents and their experience, because my grandparents escaped from Croatia when it was still Yugoslavia, when it was going through a lot of war at the time. It was about 50 years ago that they came over to the States. The dictator Tito was taking over at the time, and then it broke into 6 different countries. And my mother's first generation American. My grandparents came here not knowing any English whatsoever, not having a job, not having a place to stay, and they were able to make a life for themselves. And they were about my age when they did this. You know, they sacrificed their life, everything they knew, to make a better life for themselves and their family. And so just being able to get to know them and know their story has inspired me so much. And I really do credit them quite a bit with where I am today, because seeing the sacrifice and dedication that they had, and then that my parents had, to give me the opportunities I've had in my life, truly moved me forward to be determined to continue to accomplish all that I could in my own life.
And as you travel throughout the United States, what have you seen in different communities within the United States at this time?
Well, my goodness, I've seen a little bit of everything. Over the past year, I traveled to 37 states and 4 countries, so it was quite a bit. I've ended up traveling over 100,000 miles. So as you can imagine, you really do see all across the spectrum, very diverse cultures and circumstances. We did things in big cities, we did things in small towns. Being, again, from a small town and from the Midwest, I really enjoy that. I enjoy the rural atmosphere and the country, but I also really enjoy the coasts and the big cities and more of the urban areas. So it was a very interesting contrast, but I think more than anything I was encouraged by what I saw, because you really do see the good that people are doing all over the country, no matter what their circumstances. And you would often go to an inner city area and you would just see people that are doing what they can to make it a better place. I worked with just hundreds of nonprofits and various causes throughout the country and the whole world, really, that it really just encourages you that there are so many good people out there that are doing what they can to make a difference in this world.
And as tonight you're involved with Teddy Bear of Hope, can you
Yes.
tell how you got involved with Sylvia and
Absolutely.
what your thoughts are on the importance of this nonprofit organization?
Right. Well, I first met Sylvia Stark actually in January at the pageant at Miss America, when I was giving up my title as Miss America 2011. And so we started talking about this. She runs a program called Miss Canada International, and she also runs Teddy Bears of Hope, which is a nonprofit. And they collect teddy bears and raise funds to send them to children overseas. The thing that really got my attention too was that about a month ago I went to Haiti for the first time, and it was an absolutely incredible experience, and I plan to go back as often as possible. And then talking to them, they were talking about the fact that they're sending the teddy bears to Haiti this year. And so I really wanted to be a part of this, and so we made it happen that I came to Canada for a week to help them out and be able to promote Teddy Bears of Hope. And it's really great to see what they're doing. I certainly hope that we can continue to raise funds and teddy bears for them, and that they will be successful in their work.
And as we're closing right now, Is there any last sort of inspirational message you want to leave with the youth at this time?
You know, I think more than anything, today I had the opportunity to go to high school and to an elementary school and speak to the students there. And what I always try to share more than anything is that overall idea of thinking about what you want your life's work to be. At the end of your life, what you want to have accomplished or how you want to have affected people. Because you and I were talking and you were really saying that exact thing, but many young people I find, I mean, I'm 19 years old, and many 19-year-olds simply don't think about their life in a big picture. They think about the here and now, they think about the day by day, but they don't consider, I may not have tomorrow, and what am I going to be remembered for, and what difference have I actually made? And so I found that my mission in life is certainly to show the love of Christ to those around me. And I try to do that in all that I do. And I think that if every person could simply define for themselves their goal and their mission and their purpose and why we're placed here on earth, it changes your life completely.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Ron Meyer here with Young America's Foundation TV. I'm sitting with Miss America 2011, Teresa Scanlon, and I wanted to ask you about young people and sort of an activism in politics. What's your feeling on that, and why should people be involved?
Well, if there's one thing that I have found so much more so this year is the general attitude that people do not want to be involved in it, especially young people, especially my generation. Those people seem to think that it doesn't affect them and that they have no part in it and that there's nothing they can do as well. Many people think that there's no difference that they can make, but that's why the things that you can do, no matter how young you are, if you're too young to vote, you can still write letters to your politicians. You can still volunteer for campaigns. When you're old enough to vote, that is your responsibility as a citizen to make your voice heard. And you can continue to write letters. You can continue to volunteer for campaigns. You can continue to find ways to be involved in those things that you care about. And you should, no matter how old you are, no matter what age. Government is something that affects every single one of us. Politics affects and changes our lives every day, whether we realize it or not. And if we continue to think that there's no reason to care about it, then all of a sudden our lives are going to be completely changed and it's going to be too late.
Now, are there any particular public policy issues that you like to focus on when you give these sort of talks?
You know, honestly, when especially speaking to young people, I talk more about activism and about following your interests and exploring your passions and finding ways to make a difference in your life. And I think that's the most important thing any of us can do, rather than everybody focusing on one issue. Find those things that you actually are passionate about. Find those things that you care about or that you have some personal experience with. You know, that can make such a difference, is when our leaders and our politicians hear from people that have had a direct contact with the way that these issues are impacting them. And so I know something for me, especially with my local and state representatives in Nebraska, is with homeschooling. As I grew up as a homeschooler, that's always something that I'm going to care passionately about, what's happening with laws affecting homeschoolers, because that's something that I do have a direct relationship with. So I think that's the most important thing you can do, is share your personal experiences and stories so people understand how it affects us in our day-to-day life.
Now, I heard you earlier talk about the Constitution, the importance of the Constitution. Where does that belief come from? Is that something that came from your family? And tell us more about what your feelings are towards the Constitution.
It comes from generally learning, I guess, about the foundation of this country, learning about how history truly does repeat itself, and learning about governments that have and have not worked. And I think that the number one thing that I feel that we should all be willing to protect and hold above all else is freedom and is liberty. And so we need to take it upon ourselves to understand where that comes from and how that's different. You know, I'm reading a book right now called The 5,000-Year Leap, and it talks about how the past 200 years of history have truly progressed so much more than the past 5,000 put together. And why is that? Looking at America's history and the principles that we're founded on can explain that for us. And I think that's something important to look at, that the Constitution and those founding documents have some pretty genius ideas in there that truly are different than anything else the world has ever seen. And we need to understand that that is what has made our country what it is right now. And if we move away from that, we are going to make the same mistakes that many other countries have.
So conserving and preserving the principles of our country, do you think that makes you a political, or not political per se, but a conservative activist, you might say?
Constitutional activist, absolutely.
Conserving the Constitution.
Right, no,
Okay,
so absolutely. Whatever the labels may be, absolutely. I do think that all of us should be much more focused on that, because whether you agree with the things in the Constitution or not, everybody needs to realize that we all have to obey the law. So if you don't agree with something that's in the Constitution, we need to go about amending it. But you have to do it the right way. You have to follow the proper steps. We can't just say, well, I don't like that law, so I'm not going to listen to it. You know, we have to focus on no one is above those laws. Right. No one is above any law. And that is where we are going to move away from that foundation and that basis, and we'll have no consistency. And anybody knows that their chaos occurs when there's no consistency in government, and when people cannot trust the government because they don't even obey the laws. And I think that's something that everybody needs to really focus on, is understanding that we have to do the right thing, we have to go about it the right way, we have to follow the rules. We just have to obey those things that were set up to protect our freedom.
A lot of constitutionalists look at the growing entitlement programs and wonder if those are really constitutional per se. And it's also,
Right.
I mean, relating entitlement spending to our generation possibly having to pay for that.
Right.
You see a possible correlation there?
Well, absolutely. It's with any issue, quite honestly. Any issue that pertains to the federal government, you have to find backing in the Constitution. The Constitution was meant to limit the federal government, not limit people, not limit the states, limit the federal government. So any positions that we're taking when it comes to federal issues need to have constitutional backing, and we need to see how that relates. Otherwise, it needs to go down to the state, the local level, and the people. But to understand that that is where the only rights in federal government lie. It's not that the Constitution leaves us powerless. It leaves the federal government a lot less powerless than the people. And I think that's something that no matter what issue it may be, we need to find does the Constitution have anything to say about this?
And do you think, I heard you talking about politicians, people were asking about, what candidate you want to support. You
Right.
said basically you can't find any politician that lives to those hardcore principles.
And I'm not saying I've carefully examined
Right,
every
right,
politician
sure,
in the world,
sure.
but absolutely, at this point, I have not found someone that I can back 100% with those ideas. That I think, and quite honestly, sometimes when you get in the mix of things and in the spirit of day-to-day life trying to get things done, sometimes people tend to put those things by the wayside and compromise to the fact that they say, well, in order to get something done here, we may just have to ignore that this time. And so I see that happening sometimes, but I'll continue to look at what politicians are doing and see if there are those that are respectful of the Constitution and those founding principles.
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate that here at the Foundation, and especially those constitutional principles and values. And going back to the debt question, do you what do you see that, especially for our generation? You're 18 years old, I'm
Right.
21. Well, you're going to have a lot of money on
Right.
our hands, right?
Right. And honestly, since I haven't gone to college, since I haven't had all those economic
Yeah.
courses and those sorts of things,
Sure.
the only thing that I can compare it to is anybody's budget, any household, any person. And growing up, my parents taught us about budgeting, about expenses, about whatever it may be, about balancing your checkbook, that sort of thing. And that's the only thing I can compare it to. And to see that my parents taught me to have more responsibility monetarily than the government does is kind of scary. That we need to understand that those basic fundamentals of economics and of a budget is that you don't spend more than you have, and you don't cut the necessities first, you cut those extra things first. You keep the necessities there and balance it from there. And I think it'll be very interesting to get deeper into the economics of everything, but that's the number one principle that people need to realize.
I mean, it seems like a novel concept for a lot of politicians in Washington, D.C., unfortunately,
Right.
balancing a checkbook.
Exactly.